In this video, I'm trying to show the process I went through to make this end grain patterned cutting board. I really hope you will find it useful or helpful. This is also my first attempt ever to try and make a video of this nature. So, yeah, please bear with me. It might not be the best quality, but yeah, let's try it. Let's give it a go. So this was my first glue up of strips of kiaat, which the Americans may know is very similar to paduk. So it was strips of kiaat and American ash. The strips were cut with a face grain on top and then turned 90 degrees for a face-to-face glue up. Following the glue up, which took at the minimum 12 hours, I removed the excess glue with a chisel and sent the glued up board through my planer. The resulting board was then cut into equally thick slices. Here I am turning those slices another 90 degrees, which resulted in end grain on top. So here I'm showing the result of a second glue up of American walnut and American ash, which would then also have to be cut into slices to be glued together with the pieces or the slices from the first glue up. Okay, so today I have my shirt on. I won't bore you with my unique physique. Today I will be cutting my second glue up board, which is this one, to go with my end grain pattern from the previous video. So this is the end grain and this is the face grain. So what I'm trying to attempt here today is to cut this second board of mine into strips that is the same thickness as this piece with the end grain. So for that I'll be using my table saw sled, which lives under the table. One of the heaviest pieces of equipment in my shop. So if you don't know what a table saw sled is, it's got runners underneath that fit into the miter slots of your table saw. Perhaps in another video I will explain how to build something like this. It slides perfectly over your table saw. So what I've done before when I was cutting this pattern from the first glue up, I put a little stop here that it has the exact distance between the blade and this little piece that I glued on my fence. So it's exactly the width of the piece of board. So what I'll be doing today is cutting this piece of board into the same width strips as this piece. So it's quite easy. I just butt up this against my little stop here on the fence, and then I can just run it through and cut small pieces one at a time. So for this I'll just have to raise my blade to the height or just above the height of the thickness of this piece of board. And then lock it in place. And then I'm ready to make the cut. So I will just put on the dust collection system and the saw, and then we can make those pieces of those cuts. Domino. Okay, so what we now have is the same thickness of end grain top with the next piece that will go into the sandwich. Might be slightly above it, which is actually better because then I can just make it even. So after this, I had thought about it, and the reason why the two pieces were not exactly the same thickness was that I switched my table saw blade between I think a 3.2 millimeter thick one, and the next one was a 2.7 millimeter. So it was like a 0.6 millimeter difference, hence the difference in thicknesses of the boards. Okay, so when gluing up, you need to use the best glue on the market. In our case, it's Alkaline Ultra, or the equivalent is the American Type Bond 3, which is water resistant. So this is the third and final glue up. Now a bottle of this glue is around 160 Rand a bottle for a 500 milliliters bottle. So for all three glue ups together, I used just about a whole bottle of this. So it's 160 Rand for a glue up. But since this is going to be an heirloom item, which you can probably pass down to your children if you look after the board carefully, it's worth it, absolutely. So use the best glue available, which I'm using here. It is a water resistant glue, not waterproof, water resistant, which means you can't put the board underwater for an extended period of time. No glue can handle underwater conditions. On humidity and temperature, I prefer to wait a few minutes for the glue that has already been spread across the board to dry a little bit. It just makes it easier to do the clamping process. The best clamps to use for a glue up like this, in my opinion, are pipe clamps. Pipe clamps work really well. So you have to spread the load a bit. So what I do is I used two pipe clamps at the bottom, and then you always have to center a clamp on the top, which you will see. That is what I am doing here. Also, when tying clamps,
just take it a little bit at a time. You tie one clamp a little bit, and then the next clamp a little bit, and yeah, just continue clamping them a little bit at a time. You don't want to tie one clamp completely tight. Spread the load, take it easy, take a breath, just spread them evenly and tighten them evenly. Clamping cores are your best friend for any glue up. It makes sure that your horizontal pieces are glued up perfectly horizontally. But you also have to make sure that if you are using just pure wooden clamping cores, they have to be covered in something like packing tape so the glue will not stick to the wood. So after a lot more sanding was done with a 120 grit belt sander, it was time to cut off the one end of the board. The Festool track saw is one of the best available, but it comes at a price obviously, but it really works extremely well. So I first used the Festool track saw, and I must say the Festool vacuum dust collector works exceptionally well with the Festool track saw. After much more sanding at 120 grit with my belt sander, it was time to square up one side of the board.
For this, I used my Festool track saw connected to my Festool vacuum. A really excellent combination. And so after squaring up the one end of the board, it was time to square up the other side of the board using my saw stop table saw. When trying to square up an edge, I prefer to, on the table saw, I prefer to use a table saw ripping jig or sled, which is something you can easily make on your own. I put a handle on this sled and yeah, it works quite well. Now, some guys might be telling you that a saw stop is overpriced and the safety features included in it is just not worth the price. But for me, my fingers are worth a lot of money. So yeah, saw stop table saw is obviously very expensive. But I'm sure many of you have seen the pork sausage demonstration on how the blade, when it touches flesh, it goes down and into a brake cartridge within like a thousands of milliseconds. So I took the plunge and invested in a saw stop, and because my fingers are just too much, very valuable to me. But still, you can do it this on a normal table saw. I am now going to add a chamfered edge to the board. So what I'm doing here is I'm using my own router table, which I built from scratch, which was one of my first projects, and I'm very pleased with how it turned out. So it's got a Makita 1800 watt router in the table. It's got windows or doors that are attached with magnets that you can easily remove. So what I'm doing here is I'm changing one of the bits I used before to a chamfered bit. Uncut bit. collection. Just opening the blast gate and then putting the system on. Okay, so I've just did a full cut of a chamfer router bit, the full size. It makes a lot of tear out. It's not worth it. So I've gone back and checked the internet, and I should have done it in increments. So that's what I'm going to do now. Rather start small. They talk about an eighth of an inch. I'm just eyeballing it. Let's see what happens. Collection. Okay, so that's how you learn. The increment cutting on the chamfer bit was so much better. It's much more smooth. I found that between each increment I just sand off the rougher pieces that was split from the piece of wood. So that's how you learn, people. But overall, looks good. This is now done at 80 grit with the belt sander, then 120. Same for the other side, 80 a few times, and then 120 with the belt sander. Now the real job starts, fine sanding with the orbital sander, which is the least favorite job of any woodworker. And I don't have a Festool Rotex, so if somebody would like to give me one, please do. Is to apply the mineral oil, which will just be the showstopper. Brings out the color of the wood. It just pops the color. Just look at the beautiful colors coming out. Now the cutting board will soak up the mineral oil, so I apply a fairly thick coat and then leave it for quite some time. Until all the overflow or the mineral oil extras are completely soaked up, and then we will remove the excess that is left. Because this is end grain, it will really soak up more than a edge grain or face grain board usually will. Stunning colors. Some people let their boards lie in a bath of mineral oil. I don't like to do that. If a board takes up, let's say you leave it in a mineral oil bath for overnight, it might take up too much mineral oil and then leach it out over a long period of time. It just needs enough to treat the board, and then after your mineral oil is soaked in on both sides, then we apply a beeswax combination to make it even more water, I won't say waterproof, but resistant, because obviously you are going to wash it under some water quickly. So yeah, that'll come after both sides have been treated with mineral oil and it's soaked in enough. If you see it soaks in fairly quickly, you can always apply your second coat, but make sure it's properly soaked. It mustn't be dry too quickly. So just going to leave this for maybe half an hour, 1 hour, and then we'll see the rest. Okay, so the mineral oil has been applied. It's soaked in all over the board, both sides, so now it's time to apply the beeswax conditioner. So I just use a normal spoon. So the beeswax keeps the oil in and it protects your board from water. And it gives a nice shine. I'm just going to use some kitchen pad towel. Wax on, wax off. Well, you guys from the 80s will know what I'm talking about now. Make sure you cover the top, the chamfered sides, or the sides, and the flat sides of your board. You don't need to apply too much of the wax. It doesn't really soak in that much. Okay, we'll just leave that there for a while to soak in a little bit, penetrate a little bit, and then it will be buffed off, the excess. So once this side is done, I'll just flip it and do the other side. Or alternatively, I may just as well turn it on its side, like so, and then apply on the other side. Ooh, wasting a bit there. Wax on, wax off. Very important to apply the wax. Don't skimp and not apply wax on your boards. It's one of the best protectors for an expensive cutting board. Okay, just gonna make it stand up and then just let it penetrate a little bit, and then it's final waxing off. Okay, so I have let the wax settle for about half an hour, and then I did a very naughty thing. I went and borrowed one of my wife's dish drying cloths. I hope she's not going to watch this video. So I'm just going to basically buff off the wax now, the excess wax. So yeah, that's the wax off part. We've done the wax on, now it's the wax off part. Just give it a nice buff. You can use a buffing machine if you wish to. I do have one, but I don't find that it's really necessary to use to go to that level of excess. Okay. See, it just makes it shine perfectly. I'm so satisfied with this pattern, the way it turned out. Okay, that's one side done. Whoops, flip it around. Buff off again. There we go. Finished. Love it.